I
Oh,
never
you're
meant to notice
finally
her the way
here.
I
I've been
did.
waiting for
It
you.
started the same way it always did for
I
me.
know, I'm sorry I'm
Coffee,
late.
quiet, and a corner seat by the window at the only cafe in town that still wrote your name on the cup with a real pen. I came here every Thursday morning after class. Not because the coffee was that good, but because it gave me somewhere to be. Somewhere that wasn't just my apartment with unwashed dishes and the silence of texts I typed and never sent. That morning, I was halfway through pretending to read a book when I heard her laugh. Not loud, just soft enough to make me look up. She was standing at the counter, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear while she waited for her order. I knew her face before my brain caught up, my mom's best friend. Claire. She hadn't seen me yet. She leaned against the counter, tapping her nails lightly on the wood, scanning the chalkboard menu like she hadn't already made up her mind. I remembered those hands from childhood, how they used to fuss with ribbons on birthday gifts, or carry too many grocery bags at once when she came by my mom's house. Now, I found myself staring at them for an entirely different reason. When she finally glanced my way, her expression shifted in surprise before melting into something warmer. Ethan, she said, tilting her head. I stood, suddenly too aware of how wrinkled my shirt felt. Hey, wow. Hi. I didn't know you came here. Only sometimes, she smiled. Your mom mentioned you moved back into town. Yeah, just for a while, I said. I folded the corner of my napkin without realizing it, trying to find a tone that didn't sound like I was apologizing for existing. She carried her drink over, gesturing to the seat across from me. Mind if I? Not at all. The truth was, I minded too much. We talked about nothing at first. The weather, the bookstore across the street, how the cafe had switched to oat milk like it was some grand revolution. She teased me for ordering the same vanilla latte I used to beg my mom for when I was 15. I joked that I was loyal, not boring. That made her laugh again, and I caught myself memorizing the sound. There were pauses between words, too, and those pauses said things neither of us named. She sipped slowly, her eyes dipping toward mine, and then away, like she wasn't sure how much space she was allowed to take. I noticed the faint line of tiredness beneath her eyes, the way she touched her necklace when the conversation lingered too long in silence. I don't think anyone else in the cafe noticed, but I did. At one point, she reached across the table, brushing a crumb from near my sleeve. A casual gesture. Still, it sent heat up my neck. I must have looked away too quickly, because she smiled like she knew. When she finally stood, slipping her bag over her shoulder, I thought that would be it, just a chance encounter, folded away like all the others. But then she hesitated, leaning closer as if deciding whether to say something. Ethan, she murmured, softer now, it's been good. Talking like this. Yeah, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Really good. She paused again. Her lips parted, then closed, then parted once more, like she was weighing something impossible in her head. Finally, she set her cup down and gave me a look I couldn't quite name. Maybe next time, she said, almost under her breath. And just like that, she was gone. I sat there with the folded napkin still in my hand, wondering what exactly she meant by next time. And why, for the first time in months, the thought of tomorrow didn't feel so heavy. The following week, I told myself I wasn't waiting for her. But I sat in the same cafe, at the same corner seat, staring at the door like it owed me something. My book stayed closed. My coffee went cold. And when Claire finally did walk in, it felt less like coincidence and more like gravity. She spotted me instantly, a smile flickering before she tried to play it casual. You again? Creature of habit, I said, shrugging. Guess I'm predictable. Nothing wrong with that. She slid into the seat across from me without asking this time, like she'd already decided the table was ours. We talked easily at first, about my classes, her job at the clinic, the way the weather couldn't seem to settle into one season. But then, somewhere between sips, her voice softened. You know, she said, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger, when your mom and I used to come here years ago, I always imagined I'd be sitting here with someone different. Different how? I asked. She looked at me for a beat too long, then gave a small laugh. Never mind. Just, life doesn't always end up the way you think it will. I wanted to ask more, but the weight in her tone stopped me. Instead, I folded the paper sleeve from my coffee into neat little squares, trying not to imagine what she meant. She must have noticed my hesitation, because she tilted her head, studying me. You're quiet, Ethan. Always were. Even as a kid. Guess I never grew out of it, I said. Or maybe, she countered, you're just careful with what you say? There's something good about that. Her words stayed with me longer than they should have. We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy. She adjusted her scarf. I glanced at her hands again, and the truth pressed against me, uninvited. She's my mom's best friend. The thought alone should have been enough to put distance between us. But instead, I imagined what it would be like if we weren't connected by that thread, if we were just two people in a cafe, with no past hanging between us. Claire, I started, then stopped, unsure what I meant to say. She gave me a patient look, like she was used to people leaving things unsaid. Then, quietly, it's okay. You don't have to. Her kindness made it harder to breathe. When we finally left, we walked side by side down the street. The bookstore's window reflected us back, her coat brushing against my sleeve, our steps almost in rhythm. Outside, she paused to adjust the strap of her bag. Thanks for the company, she said softly. I nodded, not trusting myself to answer. And then, just before she turned to go, she reached out and squeezed my arm. Light, brief, almost nothing. But it lingered like a secret, long after she was gone. It didn't take long before our meetings slipped into a rhythm. Thursdays at the cafe weren't accidents anymore. I told myself it was harmless, just coffee, just talking, but the way my chest lifted when she walked and said otherwise. That afternoon, though, something shifted. Claire looked different when she arrived. Less polished, her hair loosely pinned, a kind of weariness in her eyes. She sat down across from me and let out a soft sigh before even touching her drink. Long day, I asked. You could say that. She smiled faintly, then shook her head. Sorry, I shouldn't unload. It's fine, I said quickly. Too quickly. You can, if you want. Her eyes flicked up to mine, searching, but she didn't speak right away. Instead, she stirred her tea slowly, watching the steam rise. Some nights, the house feels too quiet. It's strange, being used to someone always there, and then not. I didn't have to ask who she meant. She was divorced. My mom had mentioned it once, casually, as if it wasn't a wound still healing. I nodded, fingers drumming lightly against my cup. I get that. I mean, I've never been married, obviously. But I know about quiet. Too much of it, she asked softly. I almost said yeah every night. Instead, I just gave a half smile. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt charged, like the air just before a storm. And then, Ethan, my stomach dropped. I turned to see a friend from class grinning at me, holding a tray. Didn't think I'd find you here. I stammered something back, but my focus darted to Claire. She sat straighter, adjusting her scarf, her expression unreadable. My friend glanced between us, smirked knowingly, then headed off to the other side of the cafe. When he was gone, the weight of what that moment looked like settled between us. Claire cleared her throat. You should be careful. People notice things. Her tone wasn't harsh, but it pressed against me like a wall. I wanted to say it didn't matter, that it was just coffee. But the look in her eyes told me she wasn't talking about appearances alone. We didn't speak much after that. Just sat, sipping drinks that had gone lukewarm, the space between us feeling both impossibly small and impossibly wide. When we finally stood to leave, she walked beside me down the block. Our steps echoed in unison. At the corner, she stopped, tucking her hair back as the wind caught it. Ethan, she began, her voice low, almost hesitant. You should know. This isn't, she trailed off, biting her lip. I waited, every nerve pulled taut. She exhaled, shaking her head. Forget it. But as she turned to go, I caught the faintest hesitation in her step, like she'd almost reached for me. And before I could stop myself, I imagined leaning in, imagined her not pulling away. We didn't. But the almost of it stayed burning in the space between us. We ended up on the park bench by accident. At least, that's what I told myself. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour when shadows stretch long and the air smells faintly of damp leaves. Claire had just finished a shift at the clinic, and I'd walked with her most of the way home before she slowed, looking at the empty bench like it had called her name. 5 minutes, she said, lowering herself onto the worn wood. I sat beside her, not too close, not too far. Close enough to hear her sigh as she leaned back, eyes tilted up toward the branches overhead. You ever notice, she murmured, how some parts of life feel louder when everything's quiet? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I fully understood. My chest felt too heavy to explain anything. She gave a faint smile, as if hearing my silence. The quiet's dangerous sometimes. Makes you think too much. Her hand rested loosely in her lap. I wanted to reach for it, just to see what would happen. Instead, I pressed my palms to my knees. "What do you think about?" I asked. Her answer came after a long pause. "The things I've lost, and the things I shouldn't want." The words lodged in me, sharp and soft all at once. I didn't speak, afraid my voice might break the moment. She kept her gaze forward, but her fingers tapped lightly against her cup, restless. "You're young, Ethan," she said at last. "You have everything ahead of you. You shouldn't be wasting afternoons with someone like me." I almost laughed, though nothing about it felt funny. Maybe I don't see it as wasting. That made her look at me, really look. The weight in her eyes pinned me to the bench. There was something vulnerable there, something she'd been holding back for weeks. "Don't," she whispered. Just that one word, but it carried a dozen others. "Don't make this harder. Don't let me want this. Don't say what I can't stop thinking." I swallowed, heat rising up my throat. "I'm not trying to. The words fell apart. Instead, I turned toward her, shoulders tense, heart racing. For a second, I thought she might lean in. She didn't. She pressed her lips together and looked away, fingers tightening around her cup. "You don't know what you're doing," she said quietly. "Then tell me." I answered before I could stop myself. The bench felt smaller, the air sharper. A car passed in the distance, breaking the silence for only a heartbeat before it settled again, heavier than before. She drew in a slow breath, then exhaled, her shoulders softening as though surrendering something. "Ethan," her voice cracked, just a little. "What happens if I can't stop?" She didn't look at me when she said it, and I didn't answer because I didn't know. The question hung there, unspoken but burning, as the sun slipped lower behind the trees. I came to the cafe the following Thursday with the same restless expectation that had carried me through the week. But the door stayed closed. The bell never rang with her laugh behind it. I told myself she was busy. Work, errands, anything. But the next week was the same. By the third, I'd memorized the sound of the door opening for strangers who weren't her. Claire didn't show. I still ordered my coffee, still folded the napkin into small, tight squares, but it wasn't habit anymore. It was distraction. I caught myself scrolling through my phone, thumb hovering over her name more than once. I typed out a message I didn't send. "Are you okay?" Another one. "I miss seeing you here." Both stayed unsent, glowing quietly before I erased them. It wasn't until nearly a month later that I saw her again, by accident, not intention. I was leaving the grocery store, arms full of bags, when she stepped out of her car. For a second, she looked like the Claire I remembered. Then her expression shifted the moment her eyes landed on me. "Ethan," she said, almost too quickly. I gave a small, nervous laugh. "Hey, I haven't seen you in a while." "I've been," she started, then stopped. She pulled her coat tighter around herself. "I've been busy." Her tone was clipped, practiced, but her hands betrayed her. They fidgeted with her keys like they couldn't keep still. I wanted to ask what was wrong, why she'd vanished. Instead, I offered the safest thing I could. "I hope everything's okay." She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It will be." We stood there a beat too long in the parking lot, the winter air sharp between us. Finally, she glanced toward the car. "I should go? My daughter's waiting." Her daughter. I hadn't thought about her in weeks, hadn't pictured what this, whatever this was, would look like if she knew. The reminder dropped like a stone in my chest. "Of course," I said quickly. "Yeah, I don't want to keep you." She nodded once, then slipped into her car, leaving me with grocery bags cutting into my palms and a knot tightening in my chest. That night, I lay awake, replaying the brief conversation over and over. I thought about the way she hadn't met my eyes, the way her voice had carried something like guilt. I thought about her daughter, someone I'd seen at family barbecues when we were kids, someone who had no idea her mother's best friend's son couldn't stop thinking about her. I typed another message. "If you don't want me around, just say so." My thumb hovered over send. But in the end, I closed my phone without pressing it. The words stayed trapped in the dark, unsent. And the seat across from me at the cafe stayed empty. It happened on a Tuesday night, not a Thursday. I wasn't expecting it. I'd given up expecting anything. Weeks had stretched on with nothing but silence, an absence that felt heavier the longer it went. I'd started staying away from the cafe altogether. But when the knock came at my apartment door, soft and uneven, I knew before I opened it. Claire stood there in the hallway, her hair pulled back carelessly, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She held her coat around her shoulders like she'd come straight from her car. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the hum of the hallway light filling the silence. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, stepping aside. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. She moved to the counter, setting her bag down, but didn't take her coat off. She looked out the small window above the sink, her reflection faint in the glass. "I shouldn't be here," she said finally. I swallowed. "Then why are you?" Her laugh was soft, but not amused. "Because I can't stop thinking about you. And because that terrifies me." The words landed heavy between us. I leaned against the opposite counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. "You disappeared," I said quietly. No explanation. Just gone. I thought it was the right thing. She turned then, meeting my eyes. "Ethan, you're so young. You're my friend's son." I told myself it had to end before it even began. But every time I tried to shut it down, she shook her head, voice catching. I just couldn't. The silence stretched, sharp and raw. "I don't know what this is," I admitted. My voice was rougher than I meant it to be. "But I know I don't want to stop seeing you." She pressed her hand to her forehead, closing her eyes like she was bracing for impact. "Do you understand what this could cost me? If people knew." "Yeah," I said. "I do." Her hand fell, and for the first time that night, she looked at me without walls. Vulnerable. Tired. Wanting. I moved before I thought about it. Just a small step closer, close enough to see the faint tremor in her shoulders. I didn't reach for her. I let the question hang in the space between us, unspoken. Claire's breath caught. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand and touched mine where it rested on the counter. Barely a brush, but enough. "I don't want to be lonely anymore," she whispered. I closed my eyes, exhaling a breath I'd been holding for weeks. Neither of us said anything more. We didn't need to. The silence felt different this time, less like an absence, more like a shelter. Her hand stayed on mine. I turned my palm upward, and she let her fingers rest there. It was small, simple, but it was the first thing that felt real. When she finally looked up at me, her lips curved into the faintest smile, and I whispered the only word I had left. "Okay." It didn't happen all at once. Nothing between us ever did. After that night in my kitchen, there weren't grand declarations or sudden promises. Just small things, strung together like beads on a thread. A walk after her shift when the air was still cool. A bench shared at the park, where silence felt less heavy than it once had. A Thursday morning where I found her already sitting at our table in the cafe, stirring her tea slowly, as if she'd been waiting for me all along. It became a rhythm. Not perfect, never that. Some mornings she was distant, lost in thoughts I knew weren't mine to fix. Other days I'd hold back, afraid of asking too much. But even in the gaps, the shape of us held. I learned the way she took her tea. 2 sugars, never stirred too much. She remembered my order better than I did. Black coffee, sometimes vanilla if I looked tired. She teased me for folding napkins into shapes I didn't realize I was making. I teased her for checking her watch at exactly 8:47 a.m., like time had to keep her honest. Once, when we sat on the old park bench, she said softly, "Funny, isn't it? How the quiet doesn't scare me anymore." I didn't answer, just rested my hand on the wood between us until hers brushed against it. That was enough. There were moments when the risk of it all returned, sharp and sudden. My mom would mention Claire on the phone, casual things. "She's been busy at the clinic," or "I should call her soon." I'd feel the weight of the secret pressed down. But then I'd think of Claire's hand brushing mine across the cafe table, the way her smile softened only when she looked at me, and I'd decide it was worth carrying. Months slipped by in that slow, careful way. The sharp edges dulled. She stopped apologizing for staying. I stopped bracing for her absence. We just lived. One Sunday morning, I found her in my kitchen, hair still messy from sleep, pouring water into the kettle like she'd done it 100 times before. She caught me watching her and raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, shaking my head. "Just feels right." She smiled at that, not wide, but deep. The kind that said she understood exactly what I meant. Now, when I think about us, it isn't about the moments we almost broke apart. It's the ordinary ones that stay. Her leaning against my shoulder on a walk home, the sound of her laugh carried low across a cafe table, the way we can sit in silence and feel like it's enough. On that same bench where everything once felt impossible, she once whispered, "This It doesn't have to be more than it is. But it's ours. And I knew then. That was all I needed. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to bring more of them to life.